to lesson 6. We're starting lesson 6 of the live course, music theory course. This is session 14. And let's jump in for context to give you a sense of where we're at in this process. I'm going to share this screen. So if you go to mycolormusic.com, what we're doing is there are a bunch of playlists at this site, and we are going through the course. We've moved through part 1, fundamentals, talking through notes, intervals, the relationships between notes, the geometry of music. And in part 2, lesson 5, we learned how to build chords. Now we are in lesson 6, chord progressions. This is where we're starting to really put these chords that we've built into patterns called progressions. And this live version of the course is where I'm adding this video series. So if you want to catch up, you can catch these videos here. Also, I'm adding filling the backlog of some of these live streams that haven't been posted to YouTube yet, so be checking that out. And Mind Movies, it's cool to have you on. Greetings and salutations to you as well. So we are going to be jumping into these chord progressions, which are really a lot of fun. This is where music theory starts to take shape and become more recognizable beyond just the atomic level of notes and intervals we've looked at so far. So I'm going to share my screen. And just so you know, we're making our way towards understanding harmonic space and moving between different keys and modes fluidly. Right here, we're getting into chord progressions to understand these at a more fundamental level. So lesson 6 is about chord progressions. And if you look at the visual table of contents, this is another way of looking at what I just showed you in those playlists, where we have moved through the fundamentals and the first lesson of part 2, chords, and now we're getting into chord progressions right here on our climb towards musical mastery throughout this course. So where you are, you've now learned the basics of chords, including how they're built in each key and exactly how to play them. So the next step is to use these chords to create progressions, full and satisfying patterns that serve as the foundation of songs. What you will learn in this lesson. Here's a quick preview of what we will cover in lesson 6. You'll see how chords are just an extension of scales, so you can rearrange them like the notes of a melody to create any progression. You'll learn why chords 1, 4, and 5 are so popular in songs today. You'll play some songs by some of the most iconic artists in history to learn the essentials of composition. And you'll also explore how the Beatles crafted their own music using the power of harmony. So beyond just the theory of music, getting into some practical applications of all these patterns. Getting sharper. Okay, so at this point in the course, I just have to say congratulations. You now know more than the vast majority of musicians ever. Why? Because you've taken the time to really learn the fundamentals of theory about the essential elements that make music work in the first place, like all of the notes and intervals that form scales, which in turn form every chord. So this diagram, to break this illustration down a little bit, you have notes and intervals. This is the circle of fifths, or the harmonic sequence of notes. And then we rearranged those notes and intervals into the chromatic scale by taking every other note and rotating them 180 degrees. Check out the earlier lessons to see that in detail. And then we have scales. From the chromatic scale, we take a subset or a subpattern of those, like the whole steps and half steps that make up a major scale. In this case, the C major scale is an example. And then from those notes, we create subpatterns of notes that form chords, like C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and so on. But of course, it probably took more than a little patience as you rose through levels 1 through 5, since this process of breaking down music to the atomic level isn't exactly glamorous, right? I mean, it was only in the last few pages of lesson 5 that you even started to strum a chord, which may have felt like a disproportionate amount of preparation before you actually got to play anything. So in lesson 5, there are pages 1 through 77 that were preparation, meaning breaking down the underlying tertian intervals of chords and seeing how they're built before we got to the more satisfying part of actually playing, which was really only the last part. So I promise that all of your diligence will pay off, however. You see, your investment up front into understanding the basic patterns of music, all the finer details, will allow you to advance with speed now, because as they say, rigorous preparation is the key to success. In fact, there's a popular saying attributed to Abraham Lincoln, although he didn't actually say this, it was someone else, about planning and executing tasks that support this point, which goes like this. If I had 5 minutes to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 3 sharpening the axe. As an aside, that feels counterintuitive, especially when you're just itching to play some scales, play some chords, play a progression, jump into Stairway to Heaven, for example. You just want that immediate gratification of playing. And I understand because I've been there too. However, it does take wisdom and patience to step back and think, if I had 5 minutes to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 3 sharpening the axe. Otherwise, you're just going to be swinging and wearing yourself out with a dull blade against this hard wood. So it actually does make sense because you're going to have a lot more efficient success. So get it, by focusing on the blade itself, he essentially worked smarter, not harder, leveraging his mind instead of more muscle, and the same will work for you as well. Only in our case, what you've sharpened is your mind, so you can really play your axe, so to speak. See what I'm saying? So the guitar is sometimes called an axe, if you didn't know. So anyway, with all of this solid insight, you're now primed to understand the logic of chords and specifically chord progressions, which form the basis of most songs today, as you will see in this lesson. So let's look a little further at chords, shall we, to see exactly how they serve as the next level of building blocks in music. Now, just pause there for a moment because I realize there may be some of you joining either now live or in the replay, and you may be wondering what this is about. So let me set this up a little more. And I should set this up clearly at the start of each of these live sessions. This full course, the music theory course, is thousands of pages, thousands of diagrams and illustrations, and like 14 or 15 hours of animated video in the playlist at mycolormusic.com. What we're doing here is going through each lesson live with sidebars, chat. We can talk through any of the points that come up in discussion. So it's a live take on these lessons. So if you want to dive into these lessons at your own pace, definitely check it out. Go to mycolormusic.com and the playlist will walk you through each lesson in order. And definitely go through each lesson in order because these concepts build on each other like building blocks, gradually advancing into the more advanced concepts. So, building blocks. Speaking of building blocks, to clarify, when I say that the chords are the next level of building blocks, what I mean is that they're not the smallest units of composition. Instead, they're just one step in a fractal chain of ever-expanding patterns. You see, just as atoms combine to form molecules, which combine to form compounds, which combine to form mixtures in the physical world, the elements of music also build upon each other, where notes combine into scales to form chords, which grow into progressions. So, Mother Nature, I don't want to say is a one-trick pony, but is definitely, there's a theme when it comes to natural patterns. So just as in the physical world, you gradually grow in complexity from the most atomic level, literally atoms in the physical world, to more complex combinations of things. Music theory works in the same way in that we start with notes at the atomic level, which we've dissected at length in part 1, lessons 1 through 4, and then we've advanced through scales, chords, and now we're getting into progressions, which are more complex but not complicated patterns. As we advance, this will all make better sense, but the point here is that chords just serve as another step in this stairway to heaven, which we're ascending to reach the bliss of writing songs. So from notes to scales to chords to progressions and songs, we're ascending through these different patterns, layer by layer, pattern and principle by pattern and principle. And now that you understand the microparticles of music, you can comprehend any structure that's possible within the framework of sound. Because, after all, just like the physical matter we find in the world around us, all patterns in music, including chords, progressions, and entire songs, inherit the quality of their smaller subcomponents. Which is why it's so good that we started with the simplest units and then worked our way up, since the same principles apply at every step to guide you through increasing levels of complexity. As an example, play through these chords in the key of G, and what do you get? Essentially another pattern that sounds just like the G major scale itself, only a lot bigger and fleshed out, like a harmonized scale on steroids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the root notes to just illustrate this point. I'm going to play the root notes of each of these chords: G, A, B, C, D, E minor, F sharp diminished, and then G, and it's just the G major scale. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Sounds nice, but when we play that pattern using the triads that are built from that, it sounds essentially like the same pattern, only fleshed out. So G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G. It's basically the same thing. Sorry. So that's kind of the idea. And the cool thing about music is that it is like everything else in nature. Like they say, as above, so below, or as below, so above. All of these patterns at the fundamental atomic level are reflected at the macro level in terms of more complicated patterns like progressions. So scales, chords, progressions, they're all kind of just different zoomed in views of the same essential patterns in music theory, which is awesome. Okay, so you can't miss it, right? And the reason for this is because the essential value of each triad in the sequence stems from the quality of its respective root, where the 1 chord basically functions as scale degree 1, the 2 chord acts as scale degree 2, and so on. And we definitely played with this idea in lesson 5, which was the previous lesson. It's cool, right? The same patterns that exist at the micro level in scales are what operate at the macro level with chords as well. And so by extension, what this means is that we can also treat chords like individual notes, rearranging them in different ways to create new and interesting chord progressions in the same way that you reorder the notes of a scale to write melodies. So we could take those notes of a melody and just kind of pick out a sub pattern or rearrange those notes in different ways. So it's like, I'm just kind of like picking around and coming up with a melody. Well, we could do the same things. Just using subsets of chords from the key of G in this example and coming up with a progression. Now, there's more of a method to the madness than what I just showed you, but that's just a quick example. We're going to get into how you arrange the chords in ways that really make sense and guide you as you go. It's the same basic idea, and often, to get started, this is exactly what the best songwriters do to compose music. First, they begin with the various chords in a key, and then they'll shuffle these chords in different ways to come up with new patterns and permutations until they find a progression that sounds just right. So we're going to play through some of these examples. This diagram on the left is the key of G, chords 1 through diminished 7, and then these progressions are just some progressions that are subsets of that pattern that sound great. And what we're going to do with these lives is I'm gonna and thank you for joining. If you're not part of Locals and a supporter on Locals yet, definitely join, and you can watch all of these videos in their full length and going through each lesson and all of the detail. Right now, we're just gonna keep the chat going with those on Locals in the community. So we'll continue on from here. Stick around, and we'll keep at it. So let's go through these examples here, and let's see.